Hey, hello everyone, this is Sergey from Ushanka Show again, and we continue our conversation about life in the Soviet Union apartment buildings. If you follow my channel, you may remember my saga, my odyssey in Soviet housing consisted of three stages. My family spent first 5 years in a family dorms where we shared a small room with another family. But fortunately, I was too small to remember most of it. I have some recollection of uh, neighbor's baby crying in the middle of the night and I couldn't sleep. I remember that part, being angry. I remember that my crib was in the end of the room, and when I was too big to fit inside, there was no room to put like twin size bed. So my father actually cut a hole in the bottom of the crib so I can stick my legs out. That's kind of memories I have from dorms. Then in 1976, we moved to the small, tiny, like 10 by 12 in feet, 120 square feet studio style apartment. And we lived there for another 5 years. And then we moved in a cooperative apartment that we purchased for 15,000 rubles in a Soviet mortgage, all those good things. That was a 3-room apartment on the second floor. So fourth floor in dorms, first floor in a studio apartment Gestinka, then the second floor. And I just want to share with you, like, there's probably quite a few things that people who lived in normal homes, they're single home families, they don't realize what counts with life in apartment buildings. So I want to share with you my recollection, basically what kind of negative things you can encounter when you have a large building with a lot of apartments, hundreds of families. There was no issue to park the car because my family didn't have a car. Most families didn't have a car. So there was literally, so there 36 apartments in the single door in Paradne. So we had 1, 2, 3, 4 apartment Paradne. So it's times 36. So about 130 families. There was a parking lot for about 6 cars, and it was enough. So anyway, so of course if you live with a lot of other families, the first issue, of course, noise. And we had a rule, so it was actually written in special books for renters. I never seen it, but it was well known that after 9 p.m. you need to turn your sound down. Don't make any loud noises, they can disturb the neighbors. So you turn TV down, whatever music. And it was ingrained in my brain so much that one time when I was out in the village with my father, we went to visit his family. They had a TV also, like my grandparents on the mother's side. Constantly, all the stories is about my grandparents in northern Ukraine. They didn't have a TV at all. So besides a little white radio, there was no electronics. While my dad's family, they actually had a TV, black and white, I believe. So, it's late night, we're watching TV, they talking loudly, TV just blaring. And I look outside, it's dark. And it's so ingrained in my apartment kid mind. So I told my dad, like, we need to turn TV down. And my dad looked at me, smiled. He said, tell your uncle, his brother. So I told him, like, Uncle Pavlo, you need to turn TV down. It's after 9 p.m. And they look at me, and they just had a good laugh. Like, look at this city boy. We don't need to turn our sound down. It's our own house, So that was, remember that shock, like, oh my God, people actually don't need to live in kind of situation when they don't need to turn sound down after 9 p.m. But generally, soundproof, it wasn't like perfect. It wasn't like bad. It was somewhere in the middle. So of course, if somebody is really loud, you could hear it. Mostly it will be drunk arguments. So there'll be wife and husband arguing, usually in the kitchen. You could hear really well in the kitchen because of the ventilation. And ventilation is a separate topic. So every kitchen would have, by the ceiling would be a small kind of covered, decorative cover opening. So it's a single, just a stack, right? So it's ventilation. So basically, warm air rises, so every room, every kitchen will share this one stack, and basically that's how there was forced ventilation going on in our kitchens. So of course, besides ventilation, the sound would travel. So if the people argue in the kitchen, which they did quite often, during the meals or whatever, husband came home drunk, well, you could hear your neighbors arguing. You maybe don't catch every word, but you're like, oh yeah, you know, neighbor Vasebov came home drunk, his wife is yelling at him. So that was a famous situation. When I kind of became a teenager, got into music and bought big speakers, so probably my neighbors could hear me blasting away Milli Vanilli, Girl, You Know It's True, other music, so that's just kind of normal thing. And of course it depends on the location of your apartment. Like if you live on the first floor, right, you don't have anybody below you, so that's less noise, but you have a more, you could hear street noise more. So that's first thing, of course, was noise. And quite often if people like forget it's late, start arguing or being loud, the way they will send a warning, somebody will take like a metal object and knock on our heating batteries, right? So we had those radiators, hot water radiators, that were hot in the winter, cold in the summer. But if you hit on them, that sound will travel all along the line, like we call it stayak. So they'll be like warning, hey, be quiet, people are trying to sleep. And I remember a girl above us, when she got married, so this bedroom, so that was my mom stayed, and my brother in the back room. It wasn't like really a bedroom. I guess the ceiling, so the hot water pipe going through the floors, it wasn't sealed real well, so I could hear periodically some loud noises of love making above us, so that was kind of hilarious. And unfortunately our neighbors, they changed, so we had our decent neighbors for a while when we moved our 3-room Capitol apartment, so that was great. Then they had to move, and the new neighbors moved in, and the guy was alcoholic, wife was just messy woman, so they constantly argued, yelling at each other, so that was like really bad because their living room shared that back room with my, same level, shared the wall, so that was always a problem. And talking about bad neighbors, my mother noticed, like, at the entry, so when you come to our apartment, so this is the door to go into our apartment, their door will be like this, right? So kind of corners, just 2 apartments. And we had entry rugs, and like doormats, them had it, and we had it. And my mom, she would sweep every week, take it outside and knock it out. That lady never done anything. It was nasty, dirty for like months. And then my mother noticed that her kids, she had 2 daughters, were wiping their feet on our rug because, there was so nasty, so they can't wipe their feet, shoes on our rug and go in their apartment. Mom was so pissed. So that was one issue with that. The biggest problem living in apartment buildings was, of course, flooding. That was the worst because despite the fact that you need, and you can do like nice remodeling, paint the walls, paint the ceiling, put the new wallpaper, there's some dumbass above you. It could be not even exactly above your level, but somewhere higher. Sometimes it could be such a decent flooding that the water will go from apartment to apartment. We had one, our neighbors above actually was a good neighbors, like husband was an engineer, I think she was a teacher. But one time she was running sink, she plugged the sink to fill with water to do dishes. And I don't think we had this overflow hole, like in a sink you have an overflow, right? So in case that water, if you plug it, forget, water will go through overflow and spill. I don't think our sinks had it, so she flooded her kitchen, and guess what? We had a big giant stain on our ceiling, our kitchen. My mom was not happy about that. But also quite often there will be bathtubs overflowing. Quite often guys come home drunk, want to take a hot bath. We did have overflow in our baths, but I don't know why, but that was a popular thing. Somebody will start the water, forget about it, and then it overflows and it just goes down. It could be like floor number 5 or 6 will have flooding, but the water will go all the way down to the first floor. So flooding was probably like the worst what can happen in your apartment, because not even your fault. You just suddenly, there's the water started dripping from the ceiling because, all this built with panels like concrete panels, so there's a seam somewhere, maybe they don't see, but water will find them. And one of my friends, Oleg, he one time came home from work, So that was already after the Soviet Union was gone. And he lived on the 5th floor. He came home and he said there was like ankle deep water in his entire apartment. And just the drunk guy above flooded his apartment, flooded the apartment below. And that was the day when he realized, I need to sell this apartment and I need to save money, get a new mortgage, and get an apartment in a new apartment building where normal people live, like people with money. Because said this is just a nightmare. Said I did a nice remodeling, fixed it, all these apartments he got from his parents, comes home from work and it's flooded. So flooding was just really bad. And of course, I already mentioned before, if you live on the top floor, so the 9th floor or the 16th floor, above you is the roof, right? And our apartment buildings had mostly flat roofs. And you know what happens if it's a winter, snow start melting, and then water can find a way. So that could be an issue that you just have periodic wet spots in your ceiling just coming from the roof. My family said we lived on the 1st floor, 2nd floor. We never had experience, but a friend of mine, I shared story that when his family finally was their turn to get an apartment after waiting for who knows how many years, 15 years, it took them 3 months being first on the list to get a new apartment, because they go to check an apartment and it was the one on the 16th floor with the wet spot in one of the rooms. They're like, we don't want it. So then have to wait till another apartment will become available. So that's the situation. And of course, I already mentioned ventilation, right? So in the kitchen, there's a ventilation hole, and also we had in the bathrooms. So like the apartment we lived, the carpenter apartment had a separate, there's a little tiny room with just a toilet, a little lavatory, and then you have we had a bathtub and a sink, and they shared the wall, and the wall will have, once again, this ventilation, and it's stacked. So guess what happens? So if someone lives in your building, so it's 9-story high, one of these families, we all share same vent, they're dirty, they have food leftovers and stuff. Sooner or later there'll be cockroaches. And those vents were just like their highway. So, you keep your kitchen clean, everything's good, and you get in the morning and there's the cockroaches everywhere and they're trying to get back in the vents. It was so frustrating, so we end up trying to you still want to have ventilation, so you can't plug it, and we didn't have a mosquitoes nets for sale available, at least not in Kiev, so people will use like bandage materials, that fabric, that white fabric that has tiny holes, so we will like tape it over the vent hole just to prevent cockroaches from coming in our apartment. So that was the main problem. So they would travel through those vents, and then of course, I already mentioned before, we had those central trash chutes, a big pipe, but it's outside an apartment in the hallway. Once again, the people dump food, we didn't have trash bags, so whatever your food waste, you just dump with your bucket and they fall down, and that'll be all sticky, nasty foods, and of course cockroaches love that, so they will travel there and then spread around. So cockroaches, even if you keep your apartment clean, will still be a problem. Another issue, living in Soviet era apartments and living later, it's essential heating, right? There's hot water heating, so there's a central boiler somewhere, and they send hot water, and you have these radiators in every room, and they'll start heating season October 15th. They'll stop heating season April 15th. Awesome, right? But for example, suddenly end of October is just warm, Indian summer, they call it. In America, we call it Babye Leta. So that will be it's like a woman in her 40s becomes hot again. Cougar summer, not Indian summer, cougar summer. So there's like really warm 70 degrees Fahrenheit outside, and the heat is on. So everyone will have windows wide open. They're like, oh my God, it's too hot, but they wouldn't shut down because we started heating season on October 15th. And then, or it becomes super cold late September, early October, but heating season starts October 15th. So everyone is freezing, cold battery, cold radiators, we call them batteries. And of course in the spring it could be the same thing, April 15th, It really could be too hot. You have windows open, so a lot of energy was wasted because people just have to open and get rid of it, you know, and it's just huge waste. Every argument, people send me comments like I'm wrong. Central heating system is so effective. No, it's not. And then I'll remember in the winter you can always trace those pipes because there'll be never snow. You could tell where the pipe goes because the snow will melt of it right away. So there was poor, even underground with poor insulation. So that was also a problem with that. And of course, you know, the way the heat comes in, so you have a super hot water enters and then it started, I'm not sure it will be like from the top going down or whatever the system is. And if going through every apartment, it's the same water, so it will be slowly losing its temperature. So whoever the person will be in the end of that heating chain, their batteries will be like lukewarm, and in the beginning it'll be super hot. So that's kind of another problem could be with central heating. There's no way to control it. It is what it is. If it's too hot, open the window, let some heat out. There was no way to adjust the flow, unfortunately. I don't know, they never come up later. I think people started adding their own little, you know, regulators, little valves, but before it was just you had nothing to, you couldn't control it at all. So that was another problem with that. And of course, essential water supply. We didn't have a water meters, believe it or not. So, you know, picture you get up in the morning and you need some, if you want to take a hot shower or hot bath in the morning. And so picture that giant line, water line going all the way from whatever the boiler is all to your apartment. You need to flush all that water that got cold overnight till the hot water shows up. So amount of water was wasted because we didn't care because there was no meters. You just turn it on and just go, you know, prepare tea or coffee, get your breakfast going. You can let that water run for 15, 20 minutes. Just go periodically check it. Yeah, it's still not hot enough. So that was huge waste of water all the time because people had to run it to get it hot again. And I noticed myself, like I grew up, we had electric meter. So I grew up, my family were like hardcore, turn the lights off, turn the lights off, turn the lights off. So when I, you know, came to America, I was like shocked that Americans keep their houses like Christmas trees, lit up every room, outside lights on. I was like, are you waiting for somebody? No. I was like, why have outside lights? It just looks nice. Like you complain about your electric bills. So we grew up constantly turning the lights off. But growing up without water meter, I would be, you know, brushing my teeth. I just turn the water on and water is running. I'm just brushing my teeth. And then one day, already here in America, it clicked like, wait a minute, I have a water meter. God damn it. So then I had to teach myself to, you know, start brushing teeth, shut the water off, then turn again to wash your brush, you know, wash your mouth. And before that, was just turning water on without thinking. And as it clicked, I was like, my goodness, wait a minute. We have a water meter. Similarly, we didn't have a natural gas meter. So we had a natural gas stoves in the kitchens to cook. There was no gas meter. So, you know, if you do moonshining and burn a lot of natural gas, you pay same amount of money of people who don't cook at all. So that was another detail. And of course, speaking of water supply, once again, my family lived on the first floor, second floor. We never had an issue with water pressure. But apparently, people on the upper floors, 9th floor, 8th floor, and especially like 16th, 15th floor, that was the issues. Like during the time when it's a heavy water usage, they would barely get any water pressure, like be hardly any water coming out of their sinks or whatever. And I guess, you know, when engineers designed the pressure, they didn't design like, okay, we need to have a 100% pressure on the top floor at the time when it's the top, you know, maximum usage of water. They probably did like, okay, on average, so many gallons used, so we need to put pumps like that because it's cheaper. So there were stories when I started researching this whole topic, I'm like, oh my goodness, never thought about that. Just people saying they had to wait for specific times, you know, middle of the night, so they can take a bath when everybody else is in the bed, or early morning. So that was another issue, living on the top floors. Although you can get a stunning views, right? If you live on the 16th floor, you know, it's really high. You could see far away, it's beautiful, but the issue was water. I guess it was constant problem, not getting good pressure. So that's another situation. And another thing I didn't realize, because our apartment works, we were lucky. I mean, I don't know if my mom had a choice which floor to get, because we were getting 3-room apartment. But the way our apartment is, like, we have a one room facing kind of like, there'll be southwest, and other 2 rooms in our kitchen facing opposite side. So it's a really nice balance. So if that room could get really hot in the summer, but since other rooms in the shade, it's kind of keeps, you can just stay in, colder rooms in the winter. That room is sunny, so we kind of hang out more in that room. But when they built these giant areas, like they piled those so-called the Жилые массивы, like hundreds of these tall apartment buildings, architects, I don't think were ever thinking about which direction, south, which direction east. They're just like, okay, we have this area, we need to pack 50 apartment buildings, so that will just locate them to like optimize the amount of housing they can fit in that area. So like next to our building was so we will be like, say like this, facing southwest, and this building right here will be like dead, pretty much almost be like south, I guess. In the summer, those poor bastards, like, you have all your rooms are facing south, and there was no air conditioner available. So people, like, they're blocking their windows with like white fabric, or if they find something reflective, shiny material, so that the whole building will look like blind windows, because everyone's just blocking. People were cooked. In the winter was comfortable, in the summer was horrible. Then of course when the air conditioning started showing up in Ukraine after the Soviet Union was gone, that everyone was installing air conditioners, and then it started overloading electric system, because wiring was never designed for that heavy electrical demand. So just a nightmare. But I said, our apartment, we got lucky. It was really just perfect, pretty much set up. One room on the warm side, and the neighbors that I mentioned, the one that were using our entry mat to wipe their feet, they had 2-room apartment plus kitchen. All 3 rooms were facing southwest. So in the summer they were having a hard time, because their room was always hot, overheated. You can't open the windows to get warmer. You don't have any windows opposite side. So yeah, they always were complaining. Then later, if you live on the lower floors, eventually trees, people plant trees around the apartment buildings, and trees will grow and they'll provide some shade. But at a specific level, like the trees won't grow above probably the 4th floor. So above that, you always gonna be exposed to sun. So lower floors, you could get some shade, so they'll be all right. So this is kind of like this whole really, kind of weird things that is living in an apartment that you face. You don't think about it. It's just a part of deal. And of course, elevators. Once again, if you live on the 2nd floor, whatever. You never used an elevator. You always walk up. Now, if you're on the 9th floor and some elevator broke down and they fix it, takes them a week to fix it, going up and down the 9th floor, that's a good exercise. 16th floor even worse. But I said, fortunately, we never, just 2nd floor, boop, 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 come up, no problem. Yeah, even my bike, when I used to have a bike, I would just drag it up the stairs. The elevator was like almost too small for my bike anyway. So this is kind of this little silly things that when you live in your own house in a private home, you don't realize what it involves with like sharing the building with a lot of families. And as once again, it depends what kind of neighbors you have, because everyone could afford. It's just you have to wait on the waiting list 10 years, 15 years. So you could get lucky with some decent neighbors on your level, and you're fine, and you can share, become like good friends, and you share recipes. Sometimes you're out of butter, you just go to the neighbors, knock on the door, hey, can I borrow some butter or sugar, whatever. That was a normal thing to kind of share. Those neighbors, once again, that used our doormat, their mom constantly borrow money from my mother. It was like almost annoying. Like she couldn't make her budget to the next pay day, so can I borrow 5 rubles? I need to buy some food. We don't have any food and out of money. And my mom's like was not happy about it, but she would let because she paid back, so that was fine. But yeah, there was a lot of interesting kind of details. Like I don't miss having my own house now. Of course, it's so it's more expensive, of course, to have it. Like yeah, cost of living in the Soviet Union apartments. If you got it from the government, the rent was really cheap. 5% of your income. It's really decent. Like this was nice not to worry about that you get kicked out because you can't afford rent. The whole idea of you cannot afford rent didn't exist. So that was pretty wild. Like they would be like, oh, I don't need to worry about saving gas, natural gas. And I think I shared the story. I remember like reading a book, and it was something about gas meter just stop producing gas. You have to put more money. And a girl had to cook food for her little brother, so she had to pound on it. It was like really like what the heck? They have meters. But of course, after Soviet Union was gone, guess what? Gas meters showed up, water meters showed up. It's actually, cost skyrocketed because it wasn't subsidized anymore. So the company that provides hot water, cold water, they're like, okay, we're gonna based on your usage. So all 150 apartments, whatever you use, we're gonna divide it by 150 apartments as you pay. So I'm like, well, I don't use a lot of water. I have only 2 members of family, and that's have 5, so they use way more water. But we gotta share and do average. Otherwise, like if you install meter, then you're gonna pay for what you use. Guess what? Everyone started installing meters. There was like huge business in Russia, post-Soviet Russia, post-Soviet Ukraine, all those former Soviet republics. Meter business was huge. Everyone was installing natural gas meters, water meters. So then, like, nope, I'm only paying for what I use. And suddenly, of course, your waste goes down because suddenly it's money of your pocket. So it became way more efficient, more expensive, but way more efficient because suddenly people started worrying about I don't want to pay for my neighbors. They use a lot of water. I don't. And of course, even it's my brother told me they figure out it was cheaper to have your own water heater. So of course, it's still central heat, but they installed a little boiler in the bathroom, and it was cheaper to make your own hot water instead of paying centrally supplied hot water, even with the meter. It's just crazy how this all went upside down. But this is what I remember about my life in the Soviet Union era apartments. I mean, I didn't mind. I didn't know any better. I just know when I went there with my wife in 2002, and that was her first time she experienced Soviet apartments. And we had a nice apartment. I thought, like 60 square meters, 3 rooms, separate toilets from the bathroom. She got depressed. Just after living in Michigan and just normal house in America, she got really depressed with this. She's like, you always turn all the lights off. It's so dark, so depressing. I was like, oh my goodness. So yeah. Anyway, well, I hope you guys like this story. Thank you again for supporting Ushanka Show. Don't forget to like this video. Maybe post a comment, share stories if you have any about your experience with apartment housing or just regular housing. We'll talk to you soon. До побачення. Goodbye.